Welcome in, not welcome back, because this is the first episode of a weekly show I want to do, kind of recapping what's been happening in retail World of Warcraft, and what a week to start this show because we've had a lot going on. We start off with the Warcraft Direct, lots of Warcraft, RTS news, classic WoW. We had Rumble and Hearthstone, but we're going to predominantly focus on this show about World of Warcraft and specifically retail. And the big thing that came out this week was player housing. You could almost feel a collective freak out when that announcement happened. And even as someone that's not really the thing I want the most out of the game, it was still hype as hell. And I'm so excited for those that have been waiting a long time for this. On top of that, what I was more interested in was that Undermin patch looks incredible. I'm a huge fan of goblins and the entire kind of steampunk aesthetic and what they're doing with that. It looks like they're really cooking with this patch. And you could just see it when Ian came on the screen, you could tell something was up. You can tell something big was gonna happen. And it's really exciting, especially where we're at right now. The war within, the hype's kind of dying down a little bit. You're kind of finding, at least in my guild and guilds that I'm looking at, or when I'm recruiting for new players for our guild, you're kind of seeing that, some of these people that are more seasonal or, tourist WoW players are starting to fall off a little bit. So I think this was a much needed spark the community needed to see, to propel us going forward. And also too, what came out was the 2025 roadmap. I love that they're doing this now. We get a look into a whole year of content. It kind of takes away this worry of what's coming next. And I'm super excited. So let's talk first about the big thing that came out of this direct, which is player housing. I think the community, and myself included, has kind of one worry about this feature is, will this just inevitably lead to cities being completely empty and everyone just chilling in their house, queuing for M+, and after an hour they finally get accepted and they're just going to use their dungeon teleport to the front of the dungeon, and then, they forgot a flask, so they get on their $90 mount, they buy the flask that costs 10,000 gold now for some reason, and then they get the mailbox, which is right on the mount as well, and then they just get into the dungeon. First pull of Arkara, the tank falls into the abyss while crossing the web bridge, and then they're just right back to their house. I think that's a legit worry, and it's something that I've thought of too when I started playing World of Warcraft, and I've been playing since the release of Classic WoW back in 2019, and I was hearing a lot of people talking about the player housing concept back then, and all the same concerns were there. But I really do think that the WoW development team learned their lesson from Garrisons. And I think this has been cooking for a long time. I think it was on their radar for a very, very long time. And I think they've thought this through. I know that the recent 20th anniversary patch is not a good example of this, where it was a kind of a buggy mess and it kind of felt pushed out. But I do think something like player housing, they know they can't mess up. They know that it's going to bring a lot of people back to World of Warcraft. It's going to excite a lot of people, especially kind of the casual, collection-based players. I myself are someone that plays WoW pretty much all season, all year round. And kind of shifts my playstyle based on where the season is. And right now we're kind of, at least my guild is still progressing Mythic. I'm still running Mythic Plus, but we're kind of getting to that time where I start getting into mount collecting, transmog. And if you give me and players like me this opportunity to showcase their collections in a player housing type environment that you can invite your friends over to, I think it's gonna light a huge spark in a lot of players. And I think it's gonna mean that the longevity of how long people are playing patches is just gonna be longer, because think about it. There's so many mounts, so many pets, so many shields and swords that you can only wear one at a time. You can only ride one mount. You can only have one or two pets out at a time. But if you can display them, if you can have a stable, kind of like Garrisons, if you can have a way, and I kind of think of Zelda Breath of the Wild, where you can kind of put your prized weapons on the wall. I think, or even something like Valheim too had something similar where you can put like the heads of the bosses on the wall. I think having something like that to show off what you've done and a place where some of these items that you've worked really hard for to live, I think that's gonna be huge. You know, I got Bulwark of Azeroth recently from the last time we had Burning Crusade Time Walking. And I've been wearing it, but if I want to switch my transmog, I still want to see that. I think that's something really cool that I've been able to achieve and something I got. I want to see that on the wall. I want to be able to like interact and have those achievements, those items that are super rare out and about all the time so I can appreciate them. I think that's going to be huge. So that being said, they know how big this is. I think they're really thinking this one through. And even though they tend to push out stuff a little too fast, I do think, I mean, we're looking at, and the roadmap here, the Midnight expansion reveal is coming summer of 2025. That's after 11.2. So we're looking at like probably a year and a half, maybe a year if we're lucky, before we see player housing. So that's a long time for them to refine things. And I'm hoping that they'll throw it on the PTR. We can test it. We can give them feedback. And they've been really good at listening to feedback and acting on it very, very quickly. You know, they might not get it right the first time, but damn, they try to listen and you know, take the feedback that we're giving them and then put it in the game. You got to look at things like Mythic Plus, Delves, they're making good progress as well, and I'll talk more about that later in the show. But with that being said, let's shift our focus over to Undermined, 11.1. We are finally going to head down to the Goblin Zone of the Undermined, and this thing looks incredible. When this came on the screen, the art style, the zone, I think it's absolutely incredible. I love, like I said before, I love the Goblin aesthetic and that kind of steampunk aesthetic, and they are crushing it with this thing. And I really do think that the Goblin raid, at least for what I'm seeing right now, is gonna be a nice, like kind of refreshing change to, I like Ashgahet. I like the Nerubians, and I do like Nerubar Palace. But it's gross, it's icky, it's kind of slimy, it kind of gives me, you know, Shadowlands vibes. And this is giving me huge Battle of the Tsar lore vibes, and that was right before I started the game, so I never got to experience that, and I've only run it trying to get like Gmod or something. So having a chance to experience a raid like this, where it's a little more quirky, a little more silly and bright and neon, I think that's going to be really fun for players, myself included, to just have like a little bit of a change of pace. Something that's coming with this patch as well is we're still going to be underground, but we're not going to be able to skyride, unlike what we can do in like the Ringing Deeps, Halifall, etc. So what they're doing instead is they have this drive feature where they're going to have this mount. Think like it almost kind of reminds me of the Delver's dirigible kind of mount, where I'm thinking it's going to be customizable in some way. At the very least, it's going to be customizable in the way that it rides. So Ian was kind of mentioning, you know, you can have like a more focus on drifting, more handling, top speed or acceleration. And I feel like they're trying to make that ground mount experience a little bit better. But to be honest, I prefer this. I am someone that I never had a problem with having to traverse the world on the ground for a long period of time. Like when I first started the game back in BFA, it took a long time for me to even get flying to begin with. And I think there is something to be said for experiencing content on the ground first. I'm just gonna show an example on the screen right now of like getting to Dornegal on foot versus flying there. And don't get me wrong, like I love flying. I think skywriding is an amazing addition. It makes things like gathering, herbing, mining, or even just like going from quest mob to quest mob, it makes it so much more fun. However, there is something about the immersion of being on the ground with your mounts and seeing things from that different perspective that I really enjoy. And I often will choose to stay on the ground for a little while, especially when I'm first questing in a zone, just to kind of see things differently. Because I know once I'm done those quests, I'm likely never gonna be running around on the ground again. So I'm actually really excited about that, and I think it's going to be so cool seeing people like whipping around on these rides here from the Goblins. And you got to know there's going to be like racing and stuff, so that's going to be a blast. It kind of gives me like Burnout or Need for Speed vibes, which is super cool. Kind of looking through this too, we're seeing in 11.1 we're getting a new dungeon, Operation Floodgate. A lot of people have been talking about they're kind of surprised that this wasn't a mega dungeon. I'm not too concerned about that, to be honest. The reason why is, unlike mega dungeons of the past, we are actually getting this right away into the mythic dungeon pool. And so I personally would rather I would rather have less content. I would rather have a smaller dungeon, but get it into the Mythic Plus pool sooner than having mega dungeon that I can only run on Mythic 0 and have to wait like a whole patch just to get it in there on Mythic Plus. And typically, I often find that with the mega dungeons, there typically is like one wing that is really good and one wing that is not so good, or at least in the Mythic Plus pool, one that you're really excited about and one you're not. I think the only one that might be different is maybe Tajavesh. I personally like both of them, but I know there's a lot of people in the community that don't like one or the other. So I think this might help with that, where they can really just focus on one dungeon, 4 bosses, 3 or 4 bosses, whatever it is, and just make it really good because it's going right into the dungeon pool from the get-go. Another thing they're announcing too, on top of a new dungeon, are new delves. With these delve changes, a lot of people were expecting a new NPC, get away from Bran, have someone new. It looks like they're gonna go back to Bran with some changes though. I'm not gonna lie, a little disappointed in that. I was kind of hoping for someone new. I know that Bran is very troublesome for a lot of people, and I'm hoping that the changes that they're gonna make will kind of like, maybe they will add something new to him that makes him feel fresh and new, or more relevant, or just less buggy in general. I personally have really fallen in love with delves the longer into the expansion I've gotten. I know that seems kind of like opposite of what you hear a lot of people say, where they felt really relevant at the very, very beginning and then kind of fell off. I actually think it's the opposite. I actually found them kind of a chore when I knew I had to do them to get the best gear. Now that I know that it's just for completionism and for fun, a little bit of storytelling, a little bit of lore, and basically just farming gear for my alts, I kind of like it, honestly. And even recently, I was just running delves on my evoker, trying to get my Prez evoker up, and I had 3 tinderboxes drop at the end of the delve, which means that for running that delve, it took me about 15 minutes. I made 6K gold. That feels insanely good. Like, that feels incredible, and I think it's just another way for different players to experience gearing up their guy and then giving them something to express their gear with. I think that's what makes these games great. It's why I love PoE, is you want to gear up your guy so you can kill Maven, and then you kill Uber Maven, etc., right? I think it's just like, it doesn't have to be the hardest thing in the world for it to be effective for what I'm looking for, and especially when it's mostly just something that's happening for my alts. That being said too, if I progress Bran on my evoker, I'm already progressing him on my main, on my Holy Paladin. So the cross, the integration of like the Warband system, I think has done wonders for the game, specifically with delves. Now, a couple of things I would love to see changed with delves is, I feel like the experience for healers versus tanks versus DPS is drastic. I've done delves on both Ret, Prot, and Holy on my Paladin, and it feels completely different. When you're playing Prot, you feel like a god. You're pulling the entire room. Delve is Bran, you can have him on damage, so he's pumping, you're pumping. You're basically unkillable, and at least in an 8 with decent gear, and it feels amazing. Ret, to a lesser extent, feels very similar. However, I'm not that great of a Ret, so I do need to have Bran on heals to kind of collect those pots as I go, but it feels pretty good. Holy, on the other hand, it just kind of feels like you're tanking, but you're not a tank. It just feels bad. Like, the difficulty in the delve is coming from tanking all these mobs, and I just wish there was a way that Bran could tank for you. Set him to tank, and then you can express your skill as a DPS or as a healer in doing your role. So if you're a DPS, you need to be like CCing, you need to be interrupting, you need to be doing damage. And maybe you can have it so like you have to do damage quickly or Bran will die. Like he's a tank, but he can't, hold threat forever, or he can't keep himself alive forever. So if you're taking forever to kill a pack, he's gonna die. Or if you're a healer, you can just keep him alive and then do damage. I think too, specifically for healers, I think having a third person in there, and I know you can group up, but let's be real, like delves are supposed to be for like that solo player. So having another NPC where you could have a Branby tank, for example, then you have like Illyria, who is a ranged DPS, and then you're a healer. Just giving an opportunity for a solo player that wants to heal, but maybe doesn't have time for dungeon that day, or wants to learn a new healer in a less chill, a more difficult environment than a follow a dungeon, but not quite Mythic Plus yet. That could be a great way for them to learn. Like they're doing tank healing. You can have AoE mechanics. They have to dodge while healing up Illyria in this situation. I think there's a lot of opportunities there without making it feel like a follower dungeon or just Mythic Plus again. So I'd love to see going forward them kind of tweak that. But that being said, I'm still having a blast with Delves right now. I think giving kind of like another end game pillar for a different group of people that maybe don't want to really engage socially all of the time. You know, they're tired from their 9 to 5 and they just want to run some delves on by themselves. I really do think it's turned out well. I think Zekfir needs some work. I just don't find him fun. I would prefer for him to lean more towards like a mage tower style. Honestly, right now he just feels like a training dummy with a couple kicks, and I would prefer them, have him like change platforms, and there's like, you have to do like not like a jumping puzzle, but like kind of have to traverse I don't know, waves, and maybe have ads, just something a little bit different. But really looking forward to all those delve changes. So also coming back in 11.1 is Plunderstorm. I am super excited about this. I think Plunderstorm is incredible. I'm super bummed that team, or at least the lead of that team, left Blizzard because, man, what a banger of an update. I think it's such a good addition to kind of spice things up. Again, kind of what I talked about earlier, it's like later in the expansion or later in a patch where things are kind of slowing down, your friends are kind of playing other games. It's just something else to do, and it felt so unique and different. And what I loved about it, unfortunately, is kind of what a lot of people didn't like about it, is playing the game rewarded my account with different collectibles, right? And again, going back to player housing, I think this is going to be insane. If you can earn like a pirate flag for your wall, you can earn like a rug or like a different fireplace or something themed like pirates. I think for me, that scratches that itch. I play this game a lot for the social aspect, for the character progression, but I love that the longer I play, the better my account is getting, the more collections I'm having. And I think these two are gonna go hand in hand, that kind of like that Plunderstorm or whatever else they're kind of cooking up in relation, bringing that over once midnight hits, I think is gonna be fantastic. I think too, they've done a really good job. I know a lot of the community did not like Plunderstorm and felt like they had to do it. And I have my own feelings about that, but I hope they figured out a way to, without punishing people for like going into the storm instantly. I always thought that kind of was a bummer, because if you zoned in and you want to play Plunderstorm and you have people like you can't loot, they're just going and dying, it did kind of ruin the experience for those that wanted to be there. So I really do hope they figure out a way to allow people to target farm the specific things they want from it, and maybe try to encourage a different kind of play style, or just kind of deter people from doing the Storm Death strat without like outrightly punishing them. Like, I don't think the game should be punishing for those that don't want to participate, that feel like they need those rewards. I hope they have something cool there for it. But for those that love it, I love Plunderstorm. I love watching Plunderstorm. I actually think I found the Plunderstorm event on Twitch more entertaining than something like the MDI or the Great Push. I think it's just so fun. I think the storylines and like the chance for comebacks, or like one person like 1v5ing people, I think it's so cool to watch people do that. So I'm excited for that. It's gonna be great. Cartel Renown, I know, was kind of giving people some of like the heebie-jeebies. I might be alone here. I didn't care about Covenants. Now, let's be very clear. I am not a high-level player. I get AOTC, do some mythic bosses. My guild's trying to get CE at some point, but if we ever do, it's likely gonna take us the whole season. Again, I'm someone that's more, I wanna play WoW the whole season, not really rushing through things very fast. And if I'm playing something that's not necessarily optimal, that doesn't bother me at all. I mostly play with my friends, and I truly think the level of dungeons or raids that I'm doing do not require me to be perfectly min-maxed. And I think too that part of that is that I'm a healer. And so I think there is some wiggle room where there isn't like a perfect way to play to heal, right? Because every encounter is different. It's not scripted. People take damage at different times. It's more like kind of feely crafty. That's why I like it actually. So I can understand that that's not the case especially for a lot of damage dealers, but I do think that a lot of people put the expectations and min-max to a fault. I think do things that they maybe don't like or wouldn't otherwise do for the numbers because they think it's correct, when in reality they probably would just play better if they just played what they liked. That's a whole nother video, but needless to say, I'm not super worried about it. I don't even think it's gonna be Covenants anyway, because if you look at the Taliesin interview with Ian, he very much was like, this is not about Covenants. It's gonna be more akin to like what we see down in Ashgahet, where you kind of like align yourself per week. We'll be interested to see how that goes. I eat this stuff up. I just love stuff to do. I love stuff to collect. Kind of bridging us over to the other announcement here is just the Siren Isle 11.0.7 is coming out on December 17th. I'm excited about this one. I love that they are taking unused assets and then giving them new life in the expansion. I find it kind of ironic where a lot of people will talk about how they want us to go back to the old world. I want to be back in WoW, but then they use assets or maybe unused assets from a previous expansion, and I'm seeing people complain that that's lazy. I just find that kind of funny. It's like you want to be in the old world, but when they use old world assets, you find that lazy. So I think it's cool. I'm excited to see it. Again, it looks like we're not gonna be able to skyride right off the bat. Again, I'm totally cool with that as well. I think it leaves you more opportunities to have like fun gameplay elements. Like it looks like we're gonna be using like grappling hooks or rocket jumps to kind of traverse around. And I'm actually also happy that it's very much like that island from Dragonflight. I can't even remember what it's called. To be honest, the Forbidden Reach. It looks a lot like the Forbidden Reach. It even has a similar like mechanic of the ring. But the big difference I'm seeing here is it's much smaller, and I actually prefer that. I think I would much rather have a smaller environment, more condensed with stuff, with treasures, with mysteries or whatnot and mechanics, than have this giant island that a lot of it kind of felt unused. And maybe I'm just a little sour about the meta achievement from that. Oh my God, that was tough. Anyway, so to kind of get us on track here, so if we're looking at the roadmap here, we have the Siren Isle, like I said, December 17th, that's coming out. We're getting a new story and quest. We're getting a new ring. Turbulent Timeways, I liked again, I love this kind of like AFK stuff where you're collecting. It's kind of like turn your brain off, put something on your other screen, and just come back every week. I love stuff like that. One of the things I actually really liked was the kind of archaeology dig event from Dragonflight. I absolutely loved the cosmetics that came out of that. Was it the most engaging gameplay? No, but I think in the grand scheme of the game, when you have Mythic Plus dungeons and Mythic rating or Heroic rating that's very demanding on your attention, to have something that's just more relaxed, you literally just clicking on piles of dirt, I don't know, I eat that stuff up. So I'm kind of excited for Turbulent Timeways. Winter Veil, same kind of story. Additional holiday updates, we'll kind of see what that is. The last thing I want to talk about, I'm not going to go through the entire roadmap. I'll make maybe another video for that. The one thing that did stick out to me is Horrific Visions. Now, I did start the game, like I said, in BFA. I started in 8.3, so Horrific Visions was one of the first things I did. I absolutely love them. I think the mask mechanic, the idea of like taking a zone and kind of flip it on its head, it's almost like kind of Stranger Things, like kind of seeing the upside down of it. I absolutely loved it. I thought the difficulty was fair. I thought there was good progression, and I kind of liked that it was like you get a key and that's it. And the stakes, I like that. I like that it felt like there were stakes to it. And I'm interested to see what they're going to do here. It looks like they're going to be connected to this new content, Nightfall. So I'm really interested to see what that is. It actually reminds me, something I didn't talk about with Delves is I would love to see them do kind of like a horrific vision premise, or even like the Headless Horseman premise with delves. You know, you already have like the scaling. We're going from like 8 to 11. I would prefer if, instead of just making like the mobs hit harder, because we've already talked about the problem with that. If you're not a tank, they're just gonna kill you, right? Instead of doing that, it could add mechanics. It could add different varieties of mobs, or maybe, you know, add a jumping puzzle. I don't know, something different that is completely optional. That's something that if you want to interact with, you might get more rewards. Maybe nothing super OP like a bunch of new like hero gear or champion gear, but maybe just a higher chance at profane tinderboxes, a higher chance, or God, some more freaking gold. You get like 6 gold for doing a delve. That's crazy. So maybe adding in some kind of mechanic like that, where you add in difficulty, not through emphasis, don't get mad, but maybe just through some kind of fun, different gameplay mechanic, or just a handicap in some way. Maybe put a timer on it. And again, people are they don't like timers. It's completely optional. It's just an idea. Really excited to see what they do there. And then lastly, before I go, a couple things at the end of this roadmap that has people really speculating online is the end of the bar goes from this yellow to this kind of fell green, and instantly people are saying, hey, we're going back to Legion. I would love to see a Legion remix. I'm not gonna lie, when they announced MoP Remix, it felt like the perfect thing for me specifically. It came at a time where the game was in a little bit of a lull, and it was basically a collectathon. The thing that I really didn't like about it though is, first of all, the scaling was a mess, and I wanted to use Remix for, obviously for collection, but for playing a different role and a different spec than I'm used to. So I normally heal, so I was trying to play things like Enhancement Shaman. I was trying to play things like Warlock. And because of the powers, and I understand what they were trying to do there is to make things different, but I wanted to feel just what the class felt like. And instead, I just had laser beams shooting out of me like the entire time, or, you know, beams of light, or you'd go into a raid and you have like a level 17 monk just spinning crane kicking for like 17 billion in the one-shotting the boss. I really had a hard time with that, and I'm hoping that maybe they'll do something a little bit different with it. But honestly, even if it's the same thing, if you're telling me I can get Legion artifact appearances or just Legion collectibles in general, I'm gonna find that way more interesting. While I did like MoP, I didn't really love the leveling and the aesthetic, and a lot of like the collectibles, while they were fine, I don't know, it just really didn't do it for me. But if you tell me I can go back and get like druid forms, for example, like get all those cat forms, I'm in there so freaking fast. But that's kind of what happened this week in World of Warcraft. I really appreciate you watching. This is my first time doing this. I'm hoping to do this more, maybe every Saturday or Sunday, putting out a recap. If you have any thoughts, please let me know. I'm brand new at this, want to keep improving. Let me know what you want to see. I think I'm gonna make some videos on a lot of like the specific stuff I talked about, maybe a little more deep dive into things like Undermin, Delves, Plunderstorm, etc., or maybe even talking about what that rune at the end of the roadmap is all about. But again, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.